Hello, my name is Daniel Beer. I'm a historian of modern Russia here at Royal Holloway, and I'm also the head of the history department. So another of the questions which has kind of animated and divided historians for a long time is quite how do the Bolsheviks succeed in consolidating power once they've seized it in October. So if we think about Russia in the context of the rest of the European continent, the October Revolution is not in and of itself really very remarkable. There are coups and attempted coups by left-wing factions in different parts of Europe at the end of the First World War. In Germany, in Italy, in Hungary, and indeed, in some countries such as Hungary, a socialist republic endures for a whole year, from 1918 to 1919. So really what sets the Bolsheviks apart is that having staged a coup, when they're a small party, they don't have any real backing at all outside of the cities. They're popular within the industrial working classes, but they're by no means the dominant sort of left-wing faction on the Russian political spectrum. How is it that by 1921-22, they are really the unchallenged rulers of almost all of the lands of the former Tsarist Empire? So that's the question. And I think that what's key here is, and this is something that Lenin, I think, understood extremely well, is the power of political kind of polarization. If you act in ways that precipitate a civil war, you polarize positions within politics. It becomes very, very difficult for people occupying a kind of, sort of middle of the road position to maintain that position. You force people to break for one of the extremes. And Lenin's kind of genius, if you like, was that he understood the October Revolution and then the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly in January 1918 essentially as a declaration of war against the defenders of the old order and against any groups in Russia that would seek to sort of navigate a kind of path through to a sort of constitutional liberal state. So what is preventing a lot of other factions on the left from acting decisively is their fear of a civil war. I mean, they're terrified that they're going to tip the country over into violent civil conflict, and that this would be devastating. The Bolsheviks embrace it. So the Bolsheviks embrace war as a tool of revolutionary kind of progress. And so Lenin understands very clearly that the seizure of power in October and the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly the following January are basically a declaration that the Bolsheviks are going to rule on their own. And they're not going to rule on the basis of sort of popular consent or with a popular mandate. They're going to rule by force. And he knows that the opponents of that arrangement will not just sort of go quietly into that dark night. I mean, they are going to resist. But he also understands that by unleashing a civil war, it will force people to choose whether you are for the revolution or you are against it. And the fundamental choice that confronts the majority of the Russian population, of course, most of whom are peasants, is: are you ready to stick with the Bolsheviks who have allowed you to seize land and are promising you, peace and bread and it's all yours, just take it? Or do you prefer some kind of return to the old order, with the restitution of landowning privileges in the countryside, So for lower class Russians, this choice is really no choice. I mean, the Bolsheviks are an unknown quantity. They're deeply suspicious of them. They abhor, many of them, the Bolsheviks' atheism and their kind of anti-religious positions. But fundamentally, the Bolsheviks are saying to the mass of the Russian peasantry, seize the land, it's yours to keep. I mean, of course, actually, it's not yours to keep in perpetuity, because the Bolsheviks revisit this question under Stalin a decade later. But it provides the Bolsheviks with this tremendous advantage over their rivals, whose own political visions about, parliamentary democracy and stuff are not nearly as potent as this basic offering that the Bolsheviks are making about land and about, sort of more social goods, the right to take things now and make them yours. And so I think the success of the Bolsheviks is explained partly by the fact that the majority of the Russian population, to kind of borrow from Karl Marx, doesn't have an awful lot to lose except its chains in the years of revolution and civil war. And the Bolsheviks are able to form a tactical alliance with these groups where they kind of pretend they're on the same page, even though in the long run it becomes very clear that they're not. But that gives the Bolsheviks a winning edge over their rivals in the civil war, and it enables them also to destroy their opponents on the left, the socialist revolutionaries and the Mensheviks and so on, because those parties are forced to choose. Once the civil war begins, they're forced to choose between support for the Bolsheviks and the Red Army, or support for the Whites and some version of a return to the old order.